The following program deals with a controversial
subject.
The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation.
The viewer is invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
the top talents in the comic book business are here to tell everything they know.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Tuesday night, another Industry of Comics episode. This is episode 30 of the Industry of Comics. Of course, I'm here with my two compadres, Jesse and Dennis, longtime comic book industry guys, longtime brick and mortar store owners. And how you guys doing this week?
We sell comics a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had a great weekend. Got to go to a comic convention on Sunday. Bought a whole bunch of books. Bought a little over 3,000 books. And then went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. Got a win there. And then got my new hat at Buc-ee's. So that was good. And then my new Kentucky Fried Chicken shirt came in.
Oh, that's
on
dope.
Monday, so, yeah. So rocking and rolling, man.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how stupid it's been. I bought, and I haven't had time, so just don't even give me the shit. So I bought a really decent garbage comic book collection. It had about 40 or 50 newsstand books, some image newsstands, just stuff that I'm like, ooh, this is exciting. I'm actually going to offer real money for this just because it's good, high quality newsstands. Every one of the Batman, what was it, Nightfall in newsstand, which was really cool because they all had the little date of the release of that issue on the newsstand tag. It had a New Mutants 87. And it's one of those, if you know this book, I don't know what the actual color is supposed to be, and I should probably ask Rob, but you know how it gauges from like a dark, deep red like that hat versus like a bright orange? This was on that red spectrum that I never see. It's so crisp and so gorgeous and red that I was like, wow, I am going to pay top dollar for this collection. And then within 5 seconds of shelling out the money, I got called to go do something stupid over at the second store, and then I had to go do something at the warehouse, and I have been zigzagging. I haven't had a chance to take a picture of how gorgeous this New Mutant 87 is sitting back at my store. I haven't had time.
That's the way it works, buddy.
Yeah.
So
I feel like Burgess Meredith with the broken glasses sitting on the, there was time. There was time to look at this New Mutants 87 and bask in its, gorgeous redness, but there's no time.
Yeah. That is the biggest thing that I'm learning as I get older, is that time is our most valuable thing in this world that we can never get back. Never get back.
There's a lot of things to praise Avengers Endgame for, but my biggest takeaway is that line that Tony Stark tells his father. Tony Stark's father tells
Tony.
I can't remember who said it, but no amount of money ever bought any amount of time.
You got it. Yep.
And that's just my biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
You know what money will buy you? New Dungeon Dragon stamps came out. USPS. There you go.
I have stamps sheets like that going back to the 60s, and they're not worth the 2 cents a piece. They're only worth the 2 cents a piece if I want to sell something.
Well, we're going to get in. We're going to get into what something is worth pretty heavy tonight. We got a lot to talk about, you guys. We're going to get into the recent Rob Liefeld Robservations podcast, where he really talked in a big way about his thoughts on comic book speculation, and a very interesting episode. And we're going to get into that. We're also going to get into innovation in comics, innovation over the years. Is there innovation in comics right now? Where is the innovation in comics? What is coming in the future? What we think is coming in the future? All that fun stuff on innovation comics. But we got to start with a very sad first story. We lost another amazing creator in the world of comic books, that being John Cassaday. Famous artist of Planetary, Astonishing X-Men, Star Wars, Was it Desperados? I think he did something, was his first work. I mean, one of the biggest artists in comics in the early 2000s, and died way too soon, 52 years old, passed away from an apparent heart attack is what they're thinking. John Cassaday, the one thing other than people talking about how amazing his art was, especially on things like Planetary and Astonishing X-Men, early Star Wars, the rebrand at Marvel, the one thing that everybody always said about John Cassaday, especially on the industry side, was how beautiful of a man John Cassaday was. And
so I've known John for almost 25 years. It was either 24 or 25. I don't know when I first met him. I can't tell you how not gay I am, but I can tell you he's one of the most beautiful looking men you ever see. He is. If I were gay, I couldn't take my eyes off of him, and I couldn't take my eyes off of this guy. So anytime we'd be at the bar, I'd always be like, "Oh, what's up? It's that fucking sexy motherfucker here," you know. And we just I was busting his balls, just telling him how much of a good-looking guy he was. No, seriously. And I knew him. You know, he and Turner were two of the most beautiful men. That if they had just decided to be himbos and not have talent, they would have done very well for themselves in the world.
Yeah. And
but
not just
on top of that, they're the most talented guys.
Yeah. One of the first things that I thought of, other than that we lost him too young, is, and this is a little bit I don't know what you call it. It's thinking back about his last work, and he had put out that really rough Wolverine and Beast book that was just lauded, and to the point where we thought, man, this doesn't look like John Cassaday's art. And it makes you think, maybe he was going through something. Maybe he was, like a medical thing. And because you look at stuff like Astonishing X-Men, you look at stuff like
these aren't even his best Astonishing X-Men.
No, they're not. They're
up in the 20s when he was doing those character design ones,
the red and blue and the
my god, the pinks and the light blues. But this is where, I mean, literally go back up to the Planetary stuff. Yeah, this is I said this when I saw these I saw them about 2 years after, because I wasn't buying new books. To me, that was the new Steranko. And that's a bold statement. He was doing Steranko shit.
Yeah.
In the late 90s.
I mean, this Astonishing X-Men run, I know everybody talks about Planetary and how amazing Planetary is, which it is amazing. Him and Warren Ellis just really took over comics for a while there, but he really took over comics with Joss Whedon when he did Astonishing X-Men. Redefined X-Men for a new generation. The colors on Wolverine's costume was groundbreaking, just on one character. The way he did Beast, it was just such an amazing look at that. All this stuff, like Jesus, this Kitty Pryde and Colossus cover, absolutely gorgeous. Dennis, the ones that you were talking about are beautiful.
It's all at the end.
No, they're
like in the 20s.
Yeah,
they're in like the 20s.
I mean, these are all gorgeous John Cassaday.
I was literally
covers.
just going through a collection, and I pulled a bunch of these
right here,
like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, well, that's the start.
Look at this.
And he was doing great, and then go a little bit further.
These look at that
right
one.
There.
That one,
that White Queen and that Wolverine are so iconic, and I know Yee cringes every time somebody says that, but I'm sorry, they're just amazing. That Kitty Pryde, amazing.
Yeah, this is when he kind of,
and then Brooks. I think Brooks comes in after that, and it lost its magic for me, even at retail, because I was a retailer at this time.
Yeah, such a great run. The storyline was amazing. Cassaday did the interior art too, which was unreal. I mean, it's not very often anymore that you see the cover artist and doing the interior art and doing a long interior art run. I mean, we had some great runs in comics that where the writer and the artist, stuck around for a big chunk. Bagley and Bendis and Maleev, Whedon and Cassaday. I mean, there was these big chunks of runs, and it just doesn't happen in comics anymore. It's a different breed of industry compared to back then, and it's just really sad to see, especially at 52 years of age.
Same age as me.
Damn.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all his independent stuff, Gen 13, Rocketeer, Hellboy, that type of stuff. So I think we just live in an industry that you got to enjoy this art. Hopefully this follows them, the next 50 years and makes a good statement for the young man, as we would say. And that's why you got to treat every day to your fullest. That you wake up, it's a win. You brush your teeth, it's a win. Well, you take a shower first, that's a win. You brush your teeth, it's a win. You put on your clothes, it's a win. You have breakfast, it's a win. That's all winning. And so you got to really start your day off with winning. And when it comes down to stuff like this, that should make you even want to win every day even more. So,
yeah. Amazing stuff to see his work, but it's really sad whenever we lose somebody, and it's gonna happen again. It's gonna happen again and again and again, and that's just life. And it's a bummer when they go too soon. That's for sure. So rest in peace, John Cassaday. Of course, rest in peace to James Earl Jones, who passed away also. Lived a long and fruitful life. James Earl Jones, iconic voice, iconic actor. The amazing thing about James Earl Jones that blows me away is he was, I think, the first person I can remember that gave the rights to his voice for AI to be used when he passes away, that they could use his voice for AI and, Darth Vader and, whatever other characters that they plan on using, in perpetuity, which is pretty unreal. So, at least we still have that, and I hope that they're able to do that, especially with Darth Vader. You can't have anybody other than James Earl Jones for Darth Vader, so we'll see how that all plays out. That being said,
I think there. Well, I mean, I get that you love the voice of Darth Vader, but there's also a weird slippery slope that when corporations can buy the essence of your voice forever, and they own it. That means your family's never going to own you again. That corporation could lease and sublease and subdivide, and I still don't know how I feel about that personally.
Well, I think you got to look at the contract. Is the royalties in it? I mean, you got to go through that whole. I'm pretty sure he had a very smart lawyer at the time. Well, I'm sure they had a smart lawyer at the time. Saying, listen, this is what we want for the future. Who knows?
Yeah.
Guess. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the biggest content creators in comic books is also one of the biggest names in comic books. That being Rob Liefeld and his amazing podcast, Robservations. Like I said many times before this, I think it's the best content out there for comic books. I think he is absolutely amazing when he gets behind the mic and he really just lets loose, and he doesn't have any regrets about saying anything. He doesn't give two shits if people are going to like him or dislike him. With what he says, he's very honest and real, and I love it. I'm here for it, and boy, did he really let the honesty fly this week when he talked about comic book speculation in the newest episode of Robservations. Did you guys get a chance to hear it? What did you guys think?
I listened to all of it, and man, he just did not give two fucks who was hearing it, and because he wanted them to hear it.
Yeah. Yep. It was
Yeah, I think the one thing great about Rob, it's like color man in sports, right? You're listening to the radio and you can actually picture what is going on. And you could see Rob in his motions, in his actions, speaking behind that podcast, really being intent on what he's saying. I think one of in my 40 years, in all honesty, I think the greatest marketer we have ever had, best social networker we have ever had. He has started from 35 years ago. 40 years ago, he has seen it all. Right. And now he's been able to grab a whole new generation who might not even look at flippers or resellers and even understand that market, might not even affect them. But he has made it something that, hey, you're going to listen to 3 hours of my opinion on this.
Yeah. Yeah. And he definitely has an opinion on it. He talked pretty heavily about his thoughts on comic book speculation and what he thinks it does to comic book fans, comic book readers, comic book buyers. And he doesn't think it's a good thing. He thinks that it basically takes them away from being able to buy comic books with their money that they're spending on, rumors and sometimes lies from people who are out there saying that a book is a big deal or vice, something like that. And he brings up some really good points. One of the interesting things that he talks about that he uses as his type of thing is the Dazzler hype that happened right before Deadpool Wolverine, which, you can't fault him on this one because the Dazzler speculation that she was going to be played by Taylor Swift in the new Wolverine movie was such a big part of comic book speculation talk and comic book speculation content that the first appearance of Dazzler in X-Men 130 was selling for up to like $2,000 in the CGC 98 at one point. And have you guys seen the prices of that book lately?
Mm-mm.
Let's go take a look.
Well, I'll give them a little ancillary story. So when the Dazzler explosion happened, I had a couple full runs of Dazzler and I put them out on my shelf, $5, 3 for 10. That's my business model. And all of a sudden, actually, there's a few of mine in this because I still haven't adjusted my prices down. And all of a sudden, I was getting Swifties and their dads and coming in and buying full runs. But I wasn't sitting there gouging on these. I think I had 30 or 40 for Dazzler 1 on the wall, and I think they were going for 50 or 60 on eBay. I don't have an infinite supply of Dazzler 1s. But I think I sold every one of my Dazzler 1s. I think I sold 1 or 2 of my low-grade 130s. I sold almost all of my single, back issues at $5, 3 for 10. Which is great. It was I consider that almost every one of those was $1 book, and I got $3 a piece for them.
These are all facsimiles, which drives me crazy.
Oh yeah,
yeah. This sale in July of 2021 or 2024 was for a Mark Jewelers 9.8. So a Mark Jewelers 9.8 sold for less than what a regular 9.8 was going for. 3 months
and that's if it
ago.
wasn't swapped out by CGC's employees too.
Yeah. So if we go to cover price and we go X-Men number 130, and let's take a look and see what cover price says about this book. Here we go. Shout out to the boys over at Cover Price, always doing a good job. And we're going to get into this pretty heavily too, because, Rob really lays it down on who he kind of holds responsible for this, which is very interesting.
The only thing that I'll comment negatively about Rob's, and I think there's just certain aspects that Rob doesn't, he probably grasped them, but he kind of glazed over them and went around them. So in the early part of his podcast, he talks about how Deadpool team up, retailers didn't order enough, the shelves are bare, and blah blah blah. But then he talks about some of the resellers gouging for these certain books on the secondary market. Well, if you're overbuying a book, if the book does pop up in value, you do have to raise, because every book sitting on your wall that you overordered is a loss. So you can't have it both ways. You're going to have to recoup some money off of that sitting inventory. And if you put it in the back because it didn't sell, that's a loss. And if all of a sudden it spikes up and you pull it out and you charge double cover or, $10 or $15 for it, or you sell it on eBay, at the market price, that's you recouping a loss from the over order. And I don't think he quite, covered that in his, in his speeches, in his podcast.
So we had one sale on the 8th, which is 2 days ago for $1,400. So it's lost about $600, in recent sales data from its height of, which is crazy.
I think this is where I get concerned with because I don't use any of these cover price or any key collector. I don't use any of that. What do you guys think? And you're not going to know the exact number here. What do you think the percentage of people buying on a platform versus a comic book store or convention or hand to hand?
What do you mean? I don't understand what you're saying.
How many people? What would be the percentage of how many people buy at a comic book store, convention, hand to hand versus online? So if you had $100,
my number for in-store is based on, and I calculated this number 7 years ago. And at that time, I was pretty confident that number was right where I had it. There were, in my opinion, 200,000 people going into comic book stores and buying new books. That based on 75,000 print run for this, 75,000 print run for that, 40,000 in the middle, that those didn't have a lot of Venn diagram overlapping customers, and that everybody who bought that also bought all of these, and everybody who bought this also bought all of these. So when I ran that number past someone at Marvel, someone who was formerly at DC, and somebody who is currently at Image, and all three of them did
So you're saying 65% of the sales per week or per month for Dazzler 130s are taking place either in a comic book store, convention, or cross hands.
Right.
Okay. So when we look at these charts, we're looking on one platform that sells online that is being covered by cover price or whoever else, right? So we're always going to look at uneven numbers, because if you're in a comic book store, you have a price. If you're at a convention, we know how conventions work: $2,000 on Friday, $1,500 on Saturday, $900 on Sunday. So you have to kind of take all these numbers you're looking at with a grain of salt a little bit. I know it's a stepping stone for you to say, okay, well, we can start from here. But because we do not register ourselves nationally at a comic book store, we definitely don't do it at a convention, right?
And we definitely don't do it on live selling platforms.
Yeah, on live selling either. So it's really a tough gauge here to say, what is the metric? What metric do I use to say where this book is? Because if you have a store owner who does not use any of those platforms, who has that maybe at $1,000, and they're at that one point they're saying it's at $2,000, he only cares about getting his $1,000. He doesn't care about that extra $1,000, right? Well, I'm sure he does if he knew. So they're just trying to sell books. So I think that's the difference, because I do think if you list on eBay, you're doing some research, right? You're saying, well, XYZ has it for this. This person has it for this. This is where I'm going to land.
So there's a lot of people right now because of this Liefeld episode, and also because it's always a hot button topic, talking about fair market value. Okay,
Right.
and fair market value is not a set thing. Too many people are try to hold key collector app or cover price or GPA, try to hold their feet to the fire, saying this isn't fair market value. You guys are only getting it from auction houses or eBay or this and that.
Right.
Listen, you guys. Like, that has been the way of collectibles forever. There is different places that you buy collectibles for cheap. You go to the flea market. You go to comic book stores that use Overstreet Price Guide. That's been a funny thing for comic book collectors forever. If you can find a store that uses Overstreet Price Guide to sell you their keys, you're buying all their keys, right? From that, because Overstreet Price Guide is a little static on how often they update their book. It's once per year, right?
And intentionally, some of the Overstreet guides leave a lot of those pre-code horror at the old price and don't update it to the new price because they want somebody to be dumb enough to buy the Overstreet and price it and put it out at a show at what,
Where's your proof on that? Where did you get that? I want to see the logistics on that and where you got that information. How many people did you ask on that?
Several, Jesse.
Yeah, several.
I'm not telling you who.
So this is my exclusive comic book cover as an Overstreet advisor. So not that means anything, but
so
here's
the other thing.
Before you go on, the Overstreet is just a guide. However, the day it comes out, it becomes obsolete. That's basically what.
And all these are just guides, and the day it comes out, it becomes obsolete. Fair market value is always what somebody is willing to pay for the book. Okay, or sorry, not fair market value. Value is always what somebody is willing to pay for the book, and that constantly changes.
Well, that's technically semi-correct because it's also what the seller is willing to sell it for. Right. So you got say both ends there.
So, but Brian, one of the things that I always got on you guys on the YouTube channel shows was, oh yeah, this 1 in 25 is going for double ratio, and I'm like, who set your guy? Which of you guys chose what the ratio of a 1 in 25 sells for? Because that was established when books were $2.99.
I think you're off about that, and the reason why I say that is because when we say that something is selling for double ratio,
and everybody says Dennis interrupts. By the way,
when you say
I'm
double,
just trying to say a $2.99 book at ratio, I never agreed to selling it at $1 a point for 1 in 25s and being a $25
where'd you
book.
get that from?
Well, no, but that's what the comic book YouTube shows would say. When they would say, "Oh, this thing is going for double ratio. It's a 1 in 25 going for $50," and I'm like,
it's going double ratio then. If it's a 1 in 25, and
that's what you're saying. Who established that $1 per 25 was the ratio?
That is the ratio. If a book sold for $50 and it's a 1 in 25, it's selling for double the ratio, and the ratio is 1 in 25. The ratio is 25, right? I mean. We're just using that as a point. We're just using that as a point of reference. We're not saying that that's what it's worth.
As books went up from $2.99 to $3.99, the cost, most retailers I know factor the cost times that ratio into what we determine we're selling it for. Okay, so you're establishing a ratio number based on an arbitrary $1 per 25.
We're just using that as a point of reference to explain the norm. For the longest time, the norm on a hot book was if it was selling for double ratio or more, right? That was the longest time. And we're not saying that ratio is that what you're talking about. We're just saying that double 25, double a 10, double a 1 in 5, double that ratio of that book it's just a point of reference. We're not saying that that's what it's worth. It's just an easy way to tell people it's selling for $50. It's easy to say if it's a 1 in 25. It's an easy way to tell somebody that it's selling for $20 if it's a 1 in 10. I'm just saying,
I always said, from the chat, from the cheap seats, this book should be going for triple your ratio. Because it cost $5.99 to the retailer per book, so it cost them $3 an issue times 25, which was $75.
Yep.
So it would take a retailer $75 to own one of these books. So if it's only going for $50, I think that retailer is losing $25 by selling it for $50.
You're wrong. You're not factoring in all those extra books that they can sell that they got to get that ratio.
Right. But you also have to, so the way I've always factored is if I get a 1 in 50, obviously would say it's just $5. So it's $2.50 times 50, which is $110 technically is what you're paying for that book. Now you're not paying for that ratio book. That book is free. You do not pay for that book because you're buying 1 in 50.
Some of the publishers make you pay for it, Jesse.
What?
Some of the publishers make you pay for it.
Yeah, some of it, but very few pay for it. But I'm just saying what I did. Then I would go in and I'd say, okay, out of that 1 in 50 that I bought, I have 25 box holders that ordered that book that is picking it up, right? So now I just have to really go by that 25 that is left that aren't sold on the rack. And that's how I would price my books. So I would minus out my guaranteed sales and then figure it out. Because if you take a book and it's 1 in 50, right? And you're paying $105 for it. I'm not going to get $105 for that book. There's no way. I mean, and the percentage, maybe there's that 1%, but most of the time you're then get 30, 40, maybe $50 if you're lucky, right? It really depends on the book. And this is when everything was ratioed from Marvel, DC, Independence, and all that. So you're making a lot of decisions on how to recoup your money and not to lose money, but also at the end of the day, not buying a 1 in 50 and having 40 books left, because then you're just losing no matter what.
So one of the things that is very interesting is we just got way off topic, but when it comes to the fair market value on stuff, fair market value, and people complaining about key collector or cover price or GPA, setting a price, and they're saying, well, you can't factor in fair market value because you're not getting live sales, garage sales, local comic shop sales. Yeah, you're right. You are 100% right. But fair market value is different depending on what you're buying, when you're buying. That's how it's always been with collectibles. And to say something that's fair market value, then you have to be smart as a buyer and also as a seller. If I tell somebody, okay, this is what I'm saying is fair market value, well, how do you get your fair market value, Brian? This is how I get my fair market value. I go to eBay, I go to Terapeak, I put in that, I see what the last sold for, and I take a look at...
Brian, what is Terapeak?
Terapeak, for those of you guys that don't know, is eBay's sold sales. They give you it's just like it's another tool that you can use. You can go look up
is
Terapeak.
That little graph button you push?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. There's two versions. So you have that, and then you have Pick Click. So Pick Click is what it's selling for today, not sales. Terapeak is sales.
So Terapeak is eBay's product research hub. That's basically all it is. So let me go ahead and do this. So for example, we can go there and let's go look up Amazing Spider-Man 300 CGC 9.8. Okay.
Yep.
So you search it. You go search the category. So I want to look in comic books and graphic novels, and I'm doing the last 3 years of research. Okay, and it gives you average sold price. But here's the problem. You can't just take these because the algorithm gets cheated a lot. So you have to go down and look.
Yep.
And so for example, if you go search by last sold, right? You can go by that. September 9th, 2024, a CGC Amazing Spider-Man 300 foil edition. So that obviously is going to bring the value down of a regular. So you have to look, okay? Amazing Spider-Man CGC 9.8 sold on September 8th, for $3,131. Okay. One sold on a newsstand, sold for $8,000 that same day. So these are, to me, the latest values, and this is how you get fair market value. Here's another non-newsstand, a 9.8 sold for $2,900. So this is where I get my fair market value. I go take a look. I look at the book. I go look at it on eBay sold sales, which is Terapeak, right? And you look in these, and I say, okay, now I'm going to start my prices at 40% of fair market value or 30% of fair market value. And fair market, again, I just want to reiterate to everybody that fair market value is different for everybody. Some people, are depending on what they're trying to buy. If you're a high roller and you want to look at pre-code horror books, you're not going to take fair market value from Overstreet. You're going to take fair market value from Heritage. You're going to take fair market value from a place that what's the word I'm looking for? Educated buyers and sellers are selling that product, because you're always going to get deals out there. That's the great things about collectibles. Going to a garage sale and seeing somebody that has something and saying, I heard it's worth more, but I'll take this. That's their fair market value. What they are willing to take is their fair market value. But you have to be an educated collector, buyer, seller, whatever in the collectibles industry to understand this stuff. And there's a lot of people who are just now getting into this industry that don't understand this, and they look at apps like Key Collector or websites like Cover Price and think that site is getting all information. They're getting information from Whatnot. They're getting information from eBay Live. They're getting information from eBay, local comic shops, whatever. And that is just not the case. And for anybody that thinks that, to me, either you're too new or you're just being dishonest with yourself, and you just want to bitch about Key Collector, or you just want to bitch about Cover Price. And one of the things that Rob really brought up is he said that, the thing that makes him kind of gets his goat. And again, I only heard it once. I have to go listen to it again. And I never want to put words in anybody's mouths, especially the Rob father. But, he kind of is like, this takes advantage of a lot of people based on one thing. And we talk about it all the time. And that is FOMO. People think that they're going to miss out on this book at this price, and it's going to go crazy, and they're not going to be able to get it anymore. Right. So, right. FOMO rules this comic book speculation world, and it has for a long time now. And the way it works is it always starts out as soon as news breaks about an option, right? 4 kids walk into a bank, news breaks about the option, right? It hasn't even been made yet. We haven't seen a trailer. We haven't gotten actors involved. It's just been option, and that option could fall apart. But news of an option caused that book to shoot up in value, right? It caused that book to be a $200 book, a $300 book. And for the first couple of days, those people that are first to market with those books, because a lot of people didn't have those books on the market yet, because there's no reason to have them up there, if they're not going to make a profit on it. But now they get those books up there, you get them up there fast enough, and you're going to get those FOMO buys. And that price is going to go down most of the time, and sometimes it could go up. And I think that people need to understand that that's a big part of the collectibles world. And comics is a weird thing, because comics aren't just collectibles. They're very functional. They're entertainment. They're stories. And that's a big thing with Rob. Rob kept on mentioning that, he had a buddy that he went over to his house, and his buddy showed him all his comics in his neighborhood, and this guy had none of his books that were graded, because he wants them to be able to read, and he wants to be able to feel them and go through them. That's also an important thing. So it's very interesting to talk value on comic books, right? And I think that the first time that value on comic books started being a thing was when these price guides started showing up, right? Before then, it was just, what's you're willing to sell it for. There's no.
Well, he did talk about Wizard and its impact.
and again, you guys, Rob has a very strong opinion of Wizard, and for good reason. They really dogged him in a big way, so he doesn't think of Wizard in a good way. Let's put it that way. So,
Right.
Well, there's a problem, and it's a problem that I think we address on this show. And it's what Jesse says, the difference between influencers and experiencers. You don't hear Jesse and I pumping up a lot of books. I got a warehouse full of books. I have stacks of books that I would love for them to overinflate so I could dump them all on the market. I don't see that with a lot of people, and I think it all comes down to the one phrase that should be beaten into all of our skulls: with great power comes great responsibility. And whatever power, influence, experience we're having on this show with our audience, with our friends and our fellow retailers and the people in the chat, I don't care enough about the money to try to scam you guys out of getting you to buy one of my books. I don't. I'm sorry. I wish I was such a scumbag as to overinflate a book so that I could make money with you guys, but I don't. So I apologize for that. I smell it on at least half a dozen, if not, and thankfully I only watch a dozen. So I smell it on half a dozen of the people I watch on YouTube, and the other half don't. But I don't think they're looking for that kind of monetization. But when I hear about the sticker people and I see clips of the sticker type people, yeah, they're the ones doing it. Yeah, these third-party middlemen are the ones that are inflating this stuff and pumping and dumping. It's not what we're doing here. It's just not. I don't care.
Yeah, I think the comic, when you're on the industry side, it's, you know what? I got to sell this Princess Leia number 3. It's sitting in my stock. If I don't sell it, it's costing me money. Then I got to sell this reprint of New Teen Titans number 2 reprint. And then it's Jupiter Legacy. So we don't have the luxury of just having key books, money books, books that are in the highlight right now. We have to sell what's in front of us in our stores or what's in our warehouses. We have to be able to have a customer come in, listen to them, and guide them and get them some great comic books. And again, I think where it's tough for me as a retailer is, in all my years of doing this, it's got to be, I might be a little bit too high on this, but I would say every 50 customers, I get one key collector who just buys key books. That's about my ratio right now, is 50 to 1. So I'm more focused on that 50. And when that one guy comes in, I'm going to try to help him to my best ability. But really, the ones that really spend a lot are the ones that come in every week, buy their $25 in books, 52 weeks a year. Those are the money makers for a retailer and a comic book store. So when it gets to fair FVM, fair market value, or fair value market, whatever, however you say that, it really is a thing of, is what have you created that helps you pay your bills? Mm-hmm. Is it that one big book, or is it a whole bunch of books? That's what you have to look on the retail side.
See, and I spent the first 30 years of selling collectibles, first with toys and then with, comics and autographs and then comic books again. In the last 2.5 years, I have inverted everything I've done down to a simple philosophy, and that's the triangle philosophy. 80% of everything that I'm looking to sell is in the bottom part of that triangle.
Yep.
I want to sell to normal people who love Spider-Man, love Batman, love Star Wars, love The Walking Dead. I want 80% of my books to go out to what I call the normies. Then I want to have 15% for that next level person, somebody who knows that John Cassaday was a brilliant artist and they are willing to pay $10 for his variant here or $5 for this, just banger cover that he did. And they know who John Cassaday is. They know what he contributed to the industry. And, they love that, his run on Astonishing was, one of the best. And I've got 15% of my inventory is aimed at them. Now, sure, the normies might go, oh, wow, I like that pretty picture. They might go to that upper 15%, but they're not going to overpay for it because it's modestly priced. Then I have 5% at the top, the tip of the triangle, the eye of Horus at the top of the pyramid. That's the 5% for the guy who he's got 5 181s and he wants to add a 6th one to it.
Yep.
I got it on the wall. There you go. Yep. I have a 9.6 ASM 300, but I don't have a 9.8. How much are you selling that 9.8 for? Fair market value to that guy? Yeah, he knows what it is. He ain't going to buy it if it's not in the price range. But if he can hold it in his hand right now and it's on eBay for X and it's on your wall for X times 10%, he might buy it. Yep. Just because it's in his hand and he walks home with it now.
Yep. Yeah, the inverted pyramid theory is what most multi-billion-dollar companies use. Mm-hmm. I don't know any company that does not invert that pyramid. So yeah, it's very interesting going from technically a buyer to who becomes a seller to sell that one book versus the one that sells the masses. I know right now we're talking about that one-to-one type customer. And it's an interesting part of the business, but it is a good cycle of the business, right? Because those are the unknowns. When you have your comic book store and you have 200 box holders coming in, who's that 201 that isn't a box holder? That's who you're focused on the most, is how do I get that one person who's from Colorado to make sure that they get some great comic book therapy, but they spend some money in the store. That's very important.
Yeah. The response is very interesting to this episode because you see a lot of people agreeing with him, talking about, the option cycle where, there's rumors of an option, it goes crazy. YouTubers start talking about it. Social media influencers start talking about it. The book goes crazy. And it either dies, after not hearing anything, or it dies after the movie comes out and there's nothing in it, or vice, and it happens a lot. And a lot of these Hot 10 shows, really people could see them as, taking prey on unsuspecting people and really trying to pump the market. But here's the interesting thing. I don't know about Comic Tom, how he handles this. I don't know how the TiVo used to handle it, and now Laura from Bird City and Nearing Nirvana is doing the Hot 10 show for Cover Price. I don't know how they handle it. But for me and Ben Stein at the House of Stein Hot 10, we are very vocal. Almost every show we bring up multiple times that if you see a book on the House of Stein Hot 10 list this week, that book is going to probably go down in value, and it's already on its way down in value.
Well, who's that guy? You had him on one of your shows, the 6-month guy, where he takes
JP's budget collecting.
Yeah. I love it when he comes across. I have to watch it. He doesn't come around enough, and I don't know what he's not doing to his algorithm or what I'm not. You know what I'm watching? You know what I'm saying? But when he comes on, I love watching it. I'll watch a 3-month-old one just to see what reason and rationale. But guess what? About 10 of those books, out of those 10 books, 5 of them have dropped drastically. 3 have fluctuated. And 2 have maybe gone up a little bit or maintained.
Yep.
And what's that tell you? That tells you that there's something to be gained from this, but you should have already had, and usually that's what I take out of it. Those 2 books are ones you probably should have had already. I mean, they're banger books that you should have had in your collection before someone told you on a top 10 list that you needed to own it, and then you overpaid for it. You know what I'm saying? There's certain books that are just evergreens.
Yes.
There was a period of time right around the pandemic where I picked up an old Wizard magazine, and I looked at that top 10 list in there, and I listened to the top 10 list, and I'm like, wait a second, this looks familiar. And it was almost 8 out of the 10 books were the same.
Well, Stein brings it up all the time. Yeah, he says, if he was to do a list based on the most selling comics, every month, it would be the same list every month. It would be Spawn 1, Amazing Spider-Man 300, Hulk 181.
And that's one thing. That's something Rob got wrong. He was like, you never see these books on the list week to week. Well, because the list curators are trying to expand those lists.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it's that 25-year-old who tells you about how well his 401k is doing.
Yeah.
Not realize he's not going to cash that in for another 40 years, dude.
Right.
And so that, I think the comic book world is the same thing. You can see a book go up, you can see it go down, you can see it transcend up again, right?
Yeah.
So it's about patience. And again, are you that person that buys a book for $2,000 and then 2 days later seeing what it has sold for? And if you are, you're probably in the wrong business, right?
Yeah.
Or you're in the wrong collectible business, I should say. So
I'll give you an example. And this is just something that has popped up recently, about every 6 months. I've got a copy 8.5 CBCS Avengers 57. And I've got it on eBay for, I think, $899, somewhere around there. And it's the same guy, because when you ask a question on eBay, it catalogs how many times have you asked a question on the same item. So I look, and the guy's asked me about every 6 months. Well, I see this book, the last sale for this book was $550. Will you take $560 for it now? And I'm like, no, I'm good, man. It's Avengers 57. This was a holy grail book for me back in the day. When I priced it at $899, I think the book was going for $750, $800, and I put it at $899 because I'm like, okay, I'll sell it for $900. I'll sell it for maybe $800. Okay, the price has gone down. Cool. It's still amazing book for me. 8.5 is a very high grade for that book. It's a very hard book to get in high grade. I'll sit on it until somebody buys it for close to the price I want, or it goes down. I'll keep it.
The other thing that I find interesting is you got a lot of people that are now saying that the comics are worthless. They're just paper. They're, people out there saying that they're investing in comics are idiots. These things are worthless. And I see those and I feel like going, okay, why don't you give me all your worthless comics for nothing because they're worthless, and watch me go and turn them into money the next night.
Here's the thing, Brian. So we've had 30 shows now. We've had guests on about 25 of these shows, right? We've had some of the most amazing people in this industry. These are people with passion. These are people with heart and soul. They've had 30 plus years, 40 years in this business, just like Jesse next door here. Anybody who says it's worthless pieces of paper aren't watching our show and hear the way Brian Pulido talks about the first comic book he picked up off of the stands at a 7-Eleven. Those people are not hearing Jimmy Palmiotti talk about the Silver Age comic book he bought. Those people aren't watching Rob Liefeld grab a book off his spinner rack during during one of his live streams and start flipping through a book that he has from his original collection for over 35 years.
Yeah.
There's a tangible thing to this thing that we put in plastic way too many times, but there's still a tangible thing that if you are just one of these money chasers coming into our temple, you don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, I think the bigger thing is anytime someone says that to me, I don't get a lot, but I do get every once in a while. I just ask them what they collect. What's your hobby?
Yeah.
Oh, I collect stamps. Oh, let's talk about stamps. Right. And so everybody's going to have their opinion, but it's most of the time it's the people that don't know. Right. are the people that say that. It's either because they want to act smart, they want to act tough, when in reality sense, they're not really educated in what they're actually speaking about. Some people just want to create controversy, right?
Yeah.
And so, that type of stuff. I mean, that's FUBAR.
So in 1991, I was my first year in my apartment, and my parents called me up and they said, "Hey, come over to our house and get all your crap out of the basement. We're selling the house and moving to Indianapolis for my stepfather's new job." And I grabbed all my shit, and I had a shoebox full of Star Wars figures, and I reminisced for a few minutes. And I took it to a collectible store, and I got $110 for this shoebox. Little did I know I had tons of the Power of the Force figures that were worth way more than $110 even at that time. But that's my first lesson in selling toys.
Yep.
And it got me waxing nostalgic, and I started talking to my friends, and I started having all these memories that everyone I knew who had Star Wars toys all had a Millennium Falcon, and I never had one. And I started selling toys so that I could buy my first Millennium Falcon. And once I owned that Millennium Falcon, it was more than just a big chunk of plastic to me. That was fulfillment of 10 years of absence for this item that I always wanted, and I had forgotten I wanted it until I held it in my hands.
Yeah.
You can't put a value on that for me.
Yep.
I'll always remember the first time that I owned a Millennium Falcon. I hung it from my ceiling from my dorm room, which was a big hit with the ladies, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But I didn't give a shit because that was my Millennium Falcon.
Yeah. So the interesting thing that you brought up was talking about, Rob's spinner rack and everything. And one of the things that he talks about in this podcast, because he realizes that people are going to give him shit. They're going to throw it right back on him and go, you're complaining about, because he really calls out the apps and the websites that, talk about speculation, whether that be cover price, GPA, or key collector. We don't know. He doesn't specifically name them, but he definitely brings them up. He says how he doesn't agree with them, and he thinks that they kind of, start the whole crowd FOMO thing. But he also brings up the fact that people buy stuff from him on Whatnot, and how he's not selling comics necessarily. He's selling his autograph. People want his autograph, so he's selling the autograph on the comics. And he talked about how he wished he would have got more autographs from the people that he looked up to, the Jack Kirby's and Neil Adams, and he got them, but he didn't get them as many as he wanted. And he said when he did get them, he wouldn't get them on the Batman Neil Adams stuff. He would get them on the books that he loved by these people. And you could tell what he's trying to say in this episode is he's coming more from the aspect of loving comic books as the functional aspect of comics, not as the collectible aspect, right? Not as the because when you talk about collectibles and then you talk about comic books as entertainment, they're two totally different things. When you start talking about collectibles, money starts getting involved, value. FOMO is in every part of the collectible industry. It's a major thing. I grew up with my mom collecting Pez, and anytime a new Pez would come out, she would have to run to those stores, look for those Pez to get them first, because she was worried she wouldn't get them if they would, and then they would be at that store forever. And she could get them. And so it's with every collectible, baseball cards, toys, every Pogs. There's this aspect of FOMO with collectibles because we think that they have value based on rarity, and you're not going to get them if you don't get them first. Okay. Right. So that's a very important thing. And we talk about this a lot. Less and less people are reading comics. More and more people are buying comics to collect these days. And there's a big difference in the years, the generations of comic collectors or readers for that fact. The amount of kids the amount of 10 to 15-year-old kids that used to go into comic book stores, that's not happening anymore. You don't see a lot of 10 to 15-year-old kids buying comics and reading comics. Whereas when I was growing up and going to the comic book store, and I would go to the comic book store once a month, I'd go in on a Saturday, my parents would drop us off. It'd be packed with kids 10 to 15 years old, you know.
and it goes, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jesse.
Well, I was going to say, I took a picture in 1982 and I stood on a chair and I took this picture on a Saturday, and it's a chair with a picture with about 25 kids, and the average age in that store on a Saturday was probably about 8 to about 18. No, there isn't maybe a couple of 21 years old. And at a free comic book day, probably in 2016, I stood on my table, took a picture of 40 people, 50 people in the store, and guess what? They were all those 12 to 18-year-olds, but now they were 40 to 50. So what has happened is we have this age gap that we have lost per decade, and it's going to continue to happen. So as we have a solid 15 to 20 years till we all move on to our next, whatever our next thing is. But the one thing I want to bring up with Rob real fast, you got to keep in mind, Rob Liefeld is historically stapled into our industry. From him being a kid, opening up his Star Wars toys by the Christmas tree, to him being with Image, him being with Marvel, it's all categorized. No matter what he says about Wizard or all those other magazines, he's always been in front of us. So his historical lineage basically has been in front of us forever. So I think Rob has a different aspect when he looks back, because he has this whole lineage to look back at by pulling up a magazine on his personal fan page. That's all people do. Oh my gosh, I just read this article from 1992 from you. Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were on this talk show. So Rob is a very unique person when it comes to this type of conversation.
Well, and one of the things that I love about Rob is just no, and actually, I think he actually talked about me a little bit in that because I posted this picture of a huge Micronaut collection I bought like 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the first people to chime in, it's kind of like when Brian Polito saw my 7-Eleven Slurpee cups, and he's like, "I need this, 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 and this." All right, here you go, Brian. He goes, "How much?" I go, "Just send me some books." And the same thing with Rob. Rob was like, you know, how much do you want for one of each? Because seeing that picture on my Facebook page brought something out of him from his childhood that he had to have again. And so I was like, look, I would probably do like, you know, 1,500 for this. Give me 1,000 and sign like 10 of my books and we're clear. And he was like, done, send the books, I'll sign them. And yeah, it was, you know, it's simple. Nostalgia is the most powerful drug. And what I was about to say before I let Jesse jump forward there, we are in a weird spot where we are losing generations. I mean, if you would have told me 2 days ago John Cassaday was going to be dead today, I would have just been like, get the fuck out of here. No. But that's a 52-year-old man and he's gone. We're in a life expectancy around 75 and we just lost John Cassaday. So that's one more person who grew up loving, you know, Chris Claremont and John Byrne X-Men. You know, that's one less person. But for every one of those that we lose, and as the love for Giant Size X-Men diminishes slightly as a key book, you know, like what is it? More Fun number 27 is the first Spectre or something like that. You know, as that diminishes and as Giant Size X-Men number 1 diminishes, all of a sudden Pokemon number 1 increases. Valiant Legend of Zelda number 1 increases. I have seen a giant resurgence in Skylanders. These things are freaking 10 years old. And I can't keep them in stock at $5 3 for $10. I can't. And there's Skylander comic books. At what point does Skylander number 1 become a greater spec book than John Cassaday's Astonishing X-Men number 1? You know, I don't know, but it's out there in the ether. There's a point in time where Skylander #1 might be the #1 sought after back issue because those guys don't care about Giant Size X-Men #1. They don't care about Ultra. Look at that's one that I was just talking about to somebody like 2 weeks ago. Jesse, 10 years ago, how much was Ultimate Spider-Man #1 worth?
Ooh, geez.
At least $100. Easy.
It was $100 book.
Yeah.
It was $100 bill every time you got one, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago. Hands down.
$300 to $500 for that variant, for the white variant. Yeah.
It was a 10-year-old book. 10 years ago, it was worth $100 every time you got one. What's it worth now?
A quarter of that.
20?
Yeah.
It's worth like 20.
Yeah. Quarter of that. Yeah.
And if you had told me 20 years ago, Ultimate Spider-Man, no one would care about. Guess what? That's the volume and issue that started what would inevitably become Miles Morales. But nobody gives a shit about that book. It was the #1 creative team since Jack Kirby and Stan Lee on Fantastic Four. The 105 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man beat Kirby and Lee.
Yep.
And no one gives a shit about that book now.
Yep.
Well, here's a prime example. Next live show you guys do a smell test on a Golden Age, Silver Age on a book that you're showing, and then see the reaction from our generation and then the reaction from the current generation.
Comic book smell?
Yeah.
Huh?
What the hell are you doing? That's so weird. I don't think I want to buy my books from you because you're smelling the book, right?
Well,
right. But they don't understand.
Here's what's very interesting also is that, you know, the people that are agreeing with them and the people that are disagreeing with them is very interesting. You could see this. Now, I love Topher. You guys probably don't know who Topher is, but Topher was a really good writer of articles over at CBSI back in the day. And CBSI got started because of speculation of comics. It's comic book speculation and investing. And that's, you know, what I grew on for a content creator. And I see this from Topher today. He's throwing a big bird and he says, I have only one thing to say to Rob Liefeld when it comes to his podcast views on comic speculators and influencers. While I understand what he is saying about market manipulation, it is unwise to lump everyone together. Does manipulation happen? Yes, and it does in all speculative markets. Not all of us are looking to make a dollar through nefarious means. I am a firm believer that each person who buys collectibles should be doing their due diligence. You are free to have your opinion, Rob, but not naming names is cowardice. Very interesting take. And this is somebody who, you know, he's known for his comic book and speculation articles, and he really took to heart what Rob was saying. And you're seeing a lot of these type of responses.
I mean, here's the thing. But Brian, let me say something. So 2 years ago, when I was big on Whatnot, for the brief year that I was a Whatnot person, I was doing a show for my love of Dave Stevens. There was no hype behind Dave Stevens. There was no speculation of a new Rocketeer movie. There was no documentary at Netflix or Amazon Prime at that time. There was none of that. I just wanted to say, guys, I have Dave Stevens books. I think you should own Dave Stevens books. Here's some Dave Stevens books. And when I realized, you know what? Okay, yeah, I got a few of you Dave Stevens guys, and I'm giving you some good deals, but you guys just aren't into Dave Stevens as much. And I just put all the boxes back and I just moved on. I think there's a difference between what some speculators do and what I am now going to kind of just I'm going to try to coin a phrase, but it's never going to catch on. Vulture speculation, which is, Robert Downey Jr. just took off his Dr. Doom mask. All of these books are the books you should chase.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we let it breathe a little bit, guys? Because we don't know what Robert Downey Jr. revealing the mask is really going to mean. Is he going to be infamous Iron Man? Is he going to be the demon in the mask? Is he going to be, Iron Man 150 versus Dr. Doom? I don't know. But the point is you don't know. There's
Yeah.
only about 5 people who fucking know, and it ain't anybody on fucking YouTube telling you to buy a comic book.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when I said 2 years ago, you guys should own more Dave Stevens, nobody listened to me. And now guess what? Everybody's chasing every Dave Stevens books. It's probably come down a little bit, but
yeah, predatory speculation is a better word for it, for sure.
Yeah,
predatory speculation. Yeah. And that definitely happens. It definitely happens.
I want to give a shout out though, because one of the people that I respect in his speculation game is Mercenaut. What's Mercenaut's real name?
Carter.
That every time his show pops into my algorithm, I try to watch it. And he's buying books that are on no one's list. He's buying books for the love of those books. And he's smart because he's buying them when nobody's looking for them.
Well, there's different types of collectors when it comes to collecting comics, right? There's people that just want to collect what everybody else is saying is hot. And then there's people like, one of the things that I used to love collecting is I would love to go if I liked the character, I wanted his first 5 appearances. I wanted his origin, I wanted those were the type of things I'd find. So I was a fan of Sabretooth. I'm going to go research his first 5 appearances. I'm also going to go research, his origin story and, the main points in his origin story. The first time he fought Wolverine, that type of stuff. Like I'm going to go search, and that's a different type of collector. That isn't just a what's hot collector. That's a person that, wants to go get, and that is a little bit more, I'm not going to say right or wrong because it's just whatever you choose, but it's a little less predatory when you're telling people, hey, I'm going to give you the information on these books, and then I'm going to say this is the current fair market value, and then I'm going to say you tell me what you want to offer me for them. So it's all about trust and also and people that aren't going to take advantage of you, which is very tough in these days because there's a lot of people out there that are willing to take advantage of other people, especially when it comes to.
When I was buying Secret Wars, which was kind of that first time I kind of dived into the overall Marvel rather than just Spider-Man. And every time the letter to the editor would pop up with an asterisk down at the bottom. And it'd be like, oh, Molecule Man got his powers when he funneled all of his excess energy from Fantastic Four #9 into space and cracked the barrier between the Beyonders universe and ours. Holy shit. I have to own Fantastic Four #9.
Yeah.
That's the moment in time when they cracked open the Beyonders universe. Now, that was just fucking Jim Shooter pulling something out of his ass to say this is when this thing happened.
Or the origin and first appearances of all the Infinity Stones,
Yeah. But the thing is I loved hunting for that book.
Yes.
Because it completed my entirety enjoyment of the Secret Wars. I bought the first book and the second book of every one of the titles where the heroes got zapped into the Beyonders universe.
Every last issue, every last panel. Yep.
Right. And it was just like I had to own every one of them.
Yep.
The Hulk, was. And I figured there was some kind of riddle I was going to unravel by seeing how they got sucked in and how they got spit back out different than when they, the Hulk came back with a broken leg and a crutch. And Rhodey comes back from Iron Man with this alien tech that blows the side of a mountain off. And he's like, whoa, I better not use that again. That's good. That's too powerful, And it was just like, those meant something to me.
Yeah.
They don't mean shit to anybody buying Secret Wars 1, Secret Wars 3 or 4, whatever one's first Titania, Secret Wars 8. Nobody gives 2 shits about any of those fucking books, but the people who read those the first time around.
Right. So a couple things. I want to back up to that one guy flipping off. Strong businessmen don't do that. Strong businessmen, strong business people do not do what that gentleman did. But what happens is we're in the comic book industry, so no one's feet is held to the fire. You're not held responsible. You don't have an integrity level you have to hold responsible to. That's up to you to have your integrity level. So that's the one thing on that always bugs me, that people do stuff in this industry because they know no one's going to hold their feet to the fire. Yeah, someone might say something, but who cares, right? The second thing is, keep in mind, again, and I've said this maybe 10 times, the quote unquote influencers in the comic book world, technically in the real industry, music industry, sports industry, they have millions and millions and millions of followers to make them influencers. Where our industry, it's basically 5,000 to 20,000, which is the mark there. So we have that going on. The third thing that Dennis was talking about, look at the anniversary covers that came out. Right, everybody had to have every anniversary cover when they.
You're talking about the 25th anniversry frame?
Yeah, because of the 25th anniversary frame. Yeah. And who the hell cared if it was the thing on the cover, right? Which kind of sucked. But that's the world we live in right now. It hasn't changed from when I sold in a comic book store in the 80s to what I sold here. It's just we have different platforms to buy from, and people telling us technically what to buy from, right? And we spent decades, we spent hundreds of years having us tell the consumer what to buy, and it's kind of a world where the consumer kind of tells you what they want to buy now.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get into some little switching, but a nice little segue from Rob Liefeld talking about comic book speculation and, apps like Key Collector and websites like Cover Price and, to the world of innovation. And when we talk about innovation in comics, those are two of the big innovations in comic book collecting that have happened in the last couple of years. But comic book innovation has been happening for ever since the comic book first got printed. Yep. And I was talking to these guys one day earlier today, and we were talking about how it feels like innovation in the comic book industry is at a really slow pace right now, and we're not seeing innovation like we saw in the last couple decades. And they both said to me, "Well, you're just not looking in the right places," and it brought up this really good talk about innovation in comics throughout the years. And we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about some of the original innovations in comics that we don't think about, some of the innovations that are happening now, and maybe some things that could happen in the future. And, remembering what comics were initially is something that a lot of us collectors don't do. Because initially comics were just something that you bought to read on the bus. You bought to read on break. You put it in your pocket, fold it up so you could have something to read on the shitter. It was like it, and then throw it away. There's no reason to keep it after you read it. Joke about it, laugh about it, give it to the kids, that type of thing. And that really changed at some point into being more of a collectible thing once. And I don't know what that point was. And I want to kind of pick your guys' brains, because was it that point that comic book stores started showing up? Was it the point that they started having bags and boards? Was it when the price guide came out? What do you think was that point in time to kind of reference and what caused it for comic books to become collectible and not just reading entertainment?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, if you look at the Philippines, they would buy these English comic books for their kids. They would learn English from it and then use it for toilet paper, right? Yeah. So that's just what happened in the Philippines. World War II, Vietnam, we were sending comics over to the military, right, and all that. So where comics started to create value starts in my estimate, about between 1940 and 1945, where the first exclusives started coming out with comic books. And these were traditionally shoe stores that were giving them out, cereal brands that were giving them out. And that was the first time people actually went somewhere to actually go grab something for technically free if you bought something. So if you bought Nabisco, you got the 4-pack of Nabisco comic books, which was Dick Tracy, Pirates, little Orphan Annie. I forgot what the fourth one was.
Buster
so
Brown.
Buster Brown and all that. So I think we started the nostalgia of, wow, I'm getting a comic book. What is this about? Right. And then their friends would go, and then everybody would go get this free stuff. And that free stuff started selling at garage sales when people left. And so I really believe it was the exclusive world in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s that expanded the wealth.
Well, it doesn't hurt that also there was this other movement, the seduction of the innocent, where they literally made comic books out to be the devil. And no matter what the comic book, they were burning them in mass.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, in the
Kids wanted them.
mid-50s, all of a sudden, a giant segment of a collectible is evaporated.
Yeah.
Period. You know, I mean, I don't know how much of the percent, but I want to say it's probably closer to 60 or 70% of all of the Golden Age comic books were just destroyed.
So this is what I did a little bit of research, and I don't know if this is true, but from what I could find, this is what a lot of people are saying was the first promotional comic book. I could be wrong on this. This is Buck Rogers in the 25th Century from the Kellogg's Company in 1933. It was a radio premium, and so very interesting from 1933. And again, you know, promo comic books are a big part of the hobby in a big way. From a lot of people, including myself, it was my first comic book. My first comic book was a promo comic book that Marvel did with Campbell Soup. It was brought home by my dad, who worked for Campbell Soup, and given to me because he was giving them away as promos in a store. Yeah. A lot of people would go to movie theaters, and you know, they take your kid to see, you know, the He-Man and the She-Ra movies.
It's a multiple assault on generations, so you have to have a strategy. And this was one of the things that I brought up to Marvel and DC years ago at a summit. You have to have an entire multi-level assault, because I'll tell you, just there's a brief 1-year period of time in my past. I want to say it's like 1978, where when I got home from school, Batman was a after-school TV show, Batman 66.
Yep.
And they would show 2 episodes of that back to back. Okay. And at the same time, if you remember this, Tasty Bread, which was like Sunbeam or whatever, you know, they had different bread companies all over the country. Tasty Bread had little stickers of all of the DC superheroes. Okay. And then on top of that, right after Batman would also be the 1950s Superman show in syndication. So I had Superman, I had Batman, I had Wonder Woman and the Flash and Green Lantern. And then guess what was on? Very brief snapshot, but I remember crying because I missed the second part of it. Was they had Challenge of the Super Friends, which was a TV show. Horrible. When you watch it now, you're just like, oh my God, I gave a shit about this, but I cried my eyes out when I did not see the Superhero Roast, which was the follow-up to the Challenge of the Super Friends.
Yep.
And my family had something to do, and it was on TV, and I was not going to get back in time. And this is before VCRs, and this is before reruns. And I didn't see that for another 35 years until bootleg VHSs showed up at Comic Book. But in that 1 year, I was so ramped up at age 7 for superheroes. And it was the same period of time when I got that first comic book. Yeah. You know, I was so ramped up for superheroes because I got assaulted on multiple levels. And if it can do it to me, it can do it to kids now. But you have to have that full court press.
Yeah.
You have to be able to hit them on different levels. And if all you're looking to do is sell a bunch of retailers a $4.99 comic book for $2.50 wholesale and give them a 1 in 25 variant and say, all right, you're on your own, make this thing popular again. Yep. Dude, you haven't been able to make Ultimate Spider-Man popular for the last 24 years.
Yep. Yeah, and just so you know, the very first promo book was 1862, which is Prelude to Alice in Wonderland. 2,000 copies were made in the UK. They shipped them over to the United States and gave those out. That is the book that is lost at CGC for 4 years that I actually own from 1862. So that is actually the first giveaway ever done. Now, the Buck Rogers is the first branded giveaway. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's a branded. It is sponsored and given away from a brand, where the Alice in Wonderland was given, the Prelude to Alice in Wonderland was just given out.
Well, I want to give you an analogy, Brian, and I think the audience will understand this. It's going to be a little bit long, so just bear with me on this. I know, roll your eyes. In 1994, between 91 and 94, I started selling toys. Old toys, collectible toys. All of a sudden, 1994 comes around, and Kenner decides to re-release Star Wars figures. And I'm like, wow, this is my chance. I'm a toy dealer. I'm going to deal in these toys. So I bought all these orange card, barrel-chested Luke Skywalkers, long saber, short tray, all these stupid variants. 0.01 on the barcode was different from this. Han Solo Hoth had an open hand versus a closed hand.
I love those
all
variants.
These variants.
Yeah.
Right. I loved them all. And I
still got them.
Yeah.
Half circle Boba Fett, full circle Boba Fett.
Yeah. Oh God, there were over 100. There was a book of 100 different Boba Fett variants. That's how insane Boba Fett got. So this went on for years, and then they had episode 1. Those sucked. Episode 2, those sucked. Episode 3 got a little bit better, but when Hasbro realized, Hasbro bought Kenner during this time, and then it became a whole thing. They had basically just run that treadmill. They were like, okay, nobody cares about this shit. We're making 10,000 of some of these figures. I mean, there are production runs as low as 10,000 units on some of the figures that came out around the episode 3 and post episode 3.
The final assortment of episode 3. Yeah.
There was a Walmart exclusive on Black Friday of
Yoda.
Of Obi-Wan Kenobi holding baby Luke and Bail Organa holding baby Leia.
Yep.
And there's only 10,000 of each of those. Now look at them; they're worthless still, and there's only 10,000 of them. But they realized we're not selling these things as much as we were. They were making 1 million of some of those figures early on, and now they're selling 10,000, and the market is dying. They started innovating. That's when you get the legacy collection. So they had released 4 different Millennium Falcons. Like I told you, Millennium Falcon is near and dear to my heart because I never owned one until 1991 or probably 92. They've done 4 different versions of the Millennium Falcon from 1994 to like 2007. They announced that they were going to redesign the Millennium Falcon, and it was going to be like $150, $200. And it was going to fit 4 people in the cockpit, and it was going to have 3 different rooms in the back of it rather than just one room with the fake little, the cover, the storage hatch. It was huge. It's one of the most beautiful things. If you're a Star Wars fan, you have to own this. It has something like 20 or 30 different sound effects into it from the movie. And the fans that were left were like, oh, that's too expensive. I'll wait till it goes on clearance. And then it goes on clearance, and then it's not around anymore. I think they went down to like $50 a piece. And the fans were like, dude, this thing's going for $200 on eBay now. Well, yeah, we released it for $150. You guys said, no, you'll wait till clearance. Walmart had to clearance out a ton of these. Why didn't you buy it when it was $150? Well, because we didn't know. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, we'll re-release it. And 2011 comes around, and they re-released it in the vintage collection. And it was $200 because price of plastic went up. You made us have to put this thing back into production. It's $200. It's exclusive to Toys R Us or whatever it was. And they didn't buy it again. And then they were like, well, I mean, we didn't buy it at $200 because it was $50 more. Well, yeah, but you bought them all at $100 when they got clearanced. and now they're going for $300 a piece, and the original's going for $350, $400 a piece. Well, yeah, but now we're willing to pay. No. There's a period where Kenner Hasbro pumped so much money into innovating to get the fans back on that it was going to take a little bit more money to get this stuff, but it was the best things you ever saw, and the fandom didn't buy it. And that led to where we're at now, which is, we'll make this, but you better fucking pay us in advance, and you're going to have to wait a year to get it. And here's Jabba's barge. It's $500. It's going to come with a couple extra figures. You're going to like it. It's going to be the biggest thing ever made for Star Wars. Well, 20,000 of us will buy this thing, but I don't think the regular market, or maybe it was 10,000. I can't remember. 10,000 to 20,000 people bought that thing. It's 2,000 to 2,500 now. And the people buying it are bitching, hey, will you re-release this? No, because then we'd be screwing the people who gave us $500, the 10,000 people who gave us $500 in advance. Yep. No, you had your chance. Yep. And that's what happens in any industry. There's a point where the comic book industry tried to innovate. I really do. I really think there's a period of time where, and if I had to guess, it was between 2000 and 2005. Jesse, do you think that they put in?
No, I think you're missing two generations, of when we started to innovate, right? Because we went from actual newsstands to spinner racks, right?
Right.
And so we expanded.
But I'm overall in general, the last time that I feel that the comic industry pumped, and I have one of these in my office.
Yeah, I think that the spinner rack is a very important thing, because the spinner rack was that first innovation in comics that went from the newsstand, out, right? Comics were always just at the newsstand. Now you have the spinner rack, and the spinner rack, it becomes part of comics lore. Okay.
Yep.
That was the next step. And we all talk about going into that Circle K or that 7-Eleven and, spinning that spinner rack around.
That's
looking for those books.
Because, and Jesse, you'll back me up on this, I think. That is a 1950s, early 60s spinner rack, but it has 70s comic books on it. Late 70s, early 80s comic books.
I think on the back side it has Archie on the back end as far as the cover goes.
But what I'm saying is that spinner rack had sat in that store for probably at that period of time 20 years.
Yep.
And it served that community for 20 years.
Yep.
So we have the spinner rack, and that's an innovation in comics. And then certain things start happening. And I don't know if this happened before comic book shops started showing up or after. And that is bags and boards and comic boxes or storage. Right. Because for the longest time, there was no bags and boards or storage for comic boxes, for comics.
I was using bags and boards in about 1984. Jesse, when did bags and boards come out?
Bag and boards really came out in the late 70s, and they were not really even called comic book bags. If there's a great commercial, I believe it's from 1977 from Ziploc, and they're actually using comics to show what you can store comics in. Look what you can store in these Ziploc bags, and they're putting comics in them. Yeah. Right. So technically you could say Ziploc bags, but late 70s. And you got to keep in mind, we were already in the phase of going from 50 cents to 60 cents which was the biggest, toughest time for a collector, because you no longer got two comics for $1. So then all of a sudden I'm trying to push bag and boards on you for $2 for the 100 pack and $6 for the board, and trying to explain to them why you would do this, because no one in history was doing it. Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't norm. It's kind of like when people talk about pressing. Pressing didn't start, 20 years ago. It started 70 years ago when people just put encyclopedias on top of the books for 2 weeks. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was how we press books. So I think the spinner rack, we go from exclusives to spinner racks. And I think the the biggest universal innovation besides bag and boards, because this actually started before bag and boards, would be the mile high inserts, right?
Shout out to this guy right below us,
Yep.
Chuck Rosansky at Mile High. And
Yep.
One of the greatest innovations in comic book buying and collecting was the Mile High advertisement that started in, as far as I can tell, the very first Mile High advertisement was in a self-published magazine called Rocket Blast. I don't know what issue.
Fandom.
Yeah, Fandom magazine.
Fanzine,
I don't know what the very first Mile High advertisement in a regular comic is.
Spider-Man. No, you got to zoom in on that top left corner there.
Well, I don't know what the very first time he bought an advertisement for in a regular comic book.
Right.
When I'm talking about like from DC or Marvel or one of the bigger publishers, not a Fandom magazine, an actual
he used
comic.
To do kind of a podcast where he talks about.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
He talks about his first trip to the Triple Fan Fair. He talks about his first trip to San Diego. He talks about his first ads. So those old podcasts, I'm sure they're cataloged somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah. And so not only did he do these types of things in comics, mail order stuff, but he also had a book that he put out himself. And this is when he got the Edgar Church collection. He did his own catalog, and this is the very first Mile High catalog from that collection. One actually sold on Heritage for $500, so these are even collectible.
Yep.
Yeah, this was a major innovation in comic books, the mail order. And I don't know if Chuck was the very first person to do it. I doubt he was, but Chuck is the most known for doing it. In Mile High Comics, Chuck is a big innovator in comic books.
Well, I remember I used to have to beg my mom to write a check, and kids out there, checks were these things that you got from the bank and had to write it out in cursive and say, I guarantee that I will buy this with money I have in the bank. And you would have to mail it off to a mail order company, and they would then send you the comic books via the mail. And I did this. I remember I picked up one of my favorite books, James Bond for Your Eyes Only, the comic book. And I got it for, I think it was 10 cents. I think everything in this one ad, this one Rosansky ad, and I think it was $2.50 was my order plus shipping. I think it was $3. And I had to beg my mom to write a check to send in the mail to buy comic books. That was a huge, huge moment in my life. But yeah, Chuck Rosansky creating a comic book store when you don't know that there's comic book stores out there.
Yep. Yeah. And there, do you want to do the super?
No. It'll pop up. Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about price points where they start to go up, we want to look at Ripoff Press, right? Underground. So Ripoff Press starts printing these books at 50 cents, right? Well, next thing you know, you go into a comic book store and
they were 25 cents first.
25 cents, yeah. So
and then they had to get little stickers that said 50 cents.
Yeah, that 50
because it cost
cents,
too much.
Yeah, because 75 cents, $1.25, and all that. So I just think that the innovations, if we really look back and we look at these standard innovations that today we laugh at, these innovations were way, way above par back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, we don't think of them as innovations, though. That's the interesting thing.
And that's what I'm saying is I don't think of it as an innovation. I think it as a unique way to start selling on a different platform. And the fact that I have to tell that to Jesse James over here, he understood that he was only going to sell so many comic books from his little store in Denver. But there were comic book fans all over the world that were going to read this particular comic book. And if I can get this giant pile of shit that I have back here in front of them, they will buy some more of this stuff. And I could order some more of this stuff. So I don't necessarily think that was an innovation other than a unique survival skill that started in the mind of one retailer who is
but aren't you saying, so isn't that direct marketing? Don't you consider that direct marketing?
It is.
Direct marketing is
that's not the industry.
To sell.
But let me, I'm going to be a snob here to my two co-hosts. We're talking about the industry of comics.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think the industry of comics cared if Chuck Brzezinski sold some extra comic books. Honestly, I don't think they did. So I can't put that under an industry innovation.
So you're telling me Marvel did not enjoy the money they made for those ads? You're telling me a whole company back in the day.
Okay, but how much do you think it cost to run an ad back in those days?
It probably was more than
next to the Hostess cupcake ad and the X-ray glasses ad.
Right, exactly.
It didn't cost much. So
it didn't cost much, but look how long he did it per title, right? It's not like it just.
I'm sure
at the end of the day,
very popular with them.
But what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is
an entire comic book.
No. What I'm saying is, look at eBay. If we look at eBay, that's pre-eBay. So how can that not be innovative to the comic book world?
Oh, it's 100% innovative to the comic book world.
It is, but it's not the industry innovating. What I'm saying.
Well, he's an industry. He was in the industry. He was a comic book store owner. Like, of course, he was. That's industry innovative.
I'll agree to disagree with you guys.
Okay, there you go. And the other thing you want to look at is the other thing that really created value and the change of maybe the industry and how we innovated was pre-code stuff, right? So that changed the value immediately.
SODI and
pre-code, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of saying the 70s is kind of where value started to creep in on comic books. 80s, obviously, 90s. Dennis is correct. Modern time, 2001, 2005 is when you saw this shift of innovation, right? Because
but that's where I wanted to go with this. Yeah. So I was explaining the Hasbro Kenner cycle, and where I think the comic book industry kind of overlays in this, which toys have clearly had a very similar, trajectory as comic books. Where I see the last time that the comic industry really pushed the innovation was right back to our buddy John Cassaday. You sit there and you look at Ultimate Spider-Man comes out. Wow, really? This is selling? All right, let's do this again. Who else can we get? Let's get Gail Simone over here to write some comic books. Let's get Joss Whedon. He's popular with that Buffy show. Let's get him to write some comic books for us. Let's get, Garth Ennis, Grant Morrison. Let's try to get this guy back. So they started pumping money into writers again, which the industry hadn't done prior to Ultimate Spider-Man #1. And then they started paying the money to get these really amazing artists and gave them the time they needed. Right around the same time, DC made that huge deal with Jim Lee to come back to Batman. What was that, 98, 99?
Yeah, but is that innovation or is that marketing?
Where I think it is they realized we have to produce one of the best products because we have this slight little resurgence in our customer base. We have we almost were dead after the crash of the mid-90s. We now have this very slim margin. We need to pump as much talent into this industry. We need to innovate our product to maintain the customers that we right now have and are liking what we're doing. Let's keep putting out the better product rather than the shit we were putting out in 1998.
Yeah, but if you look, we came out with Baxter Paper, right? How did that work? Baxter Paper, greatest thing ever to happen in the comic book world, 1982, 1983.
But once we came up with the glossy paper of 2000, 2001, they don't even use paper within 2 years. It all went to that glossy slick shit.
Right.
Another big innovation in comic books was the first price guide, right? We talk about Overstreet all the time, but that was not the first price guide. The first price guide in comic books was the Argosy comic book price guide. Shout out to Nick at Key Collector, who's another innovator in comic book industry. This is it. First known comic book price guide, published in 1965, 5 years before the first Overstreet. As of right now, a major collectible in itself. Fewer than 50 copies are known to exist. So pretty amazing.
So this was another fanzine. The Argosy was a fanzine, and they published this as part of their regular customer base.
Yep.
So, and then of course, Overstreet comes out, and Overstreet is very innovative too, because Overstreet, I don't know if they've always done this, but they would. One of the things that's crazy about Overstreet is they would contact comic shop owners from around the country to get information from them too. Which kind of created that web of information, which we didn't see again until the internet, right?
Yep.
So Overstreet
I would
was,
say till Wizard. I would say till Wizard.
Yep. Till Wizard. Yeah.
and then Wizard is one of the biggest innovators in comics in the last 50 years.
Well,
for
and
sure.
I like to say, I didn't know what a comic book creator looked like until I saw Wizard magazine.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I knew what every one of them looked like.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Being able to see those creators, you usually didn't see them unless you went to a convention.
Or you saw a bad drawing of them in Marvel Age done by Fred Himbeck, and you're like, oh, I kind of think that's what he looks like, but I don't know what he looks like, not Himbeck.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wizard magazine is one of the biggest innovators on multiple levels. Price guide, showing you a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtain, so to say, of the comic book industry. How to draw, how to letter, how to all kinds of stuff. Wizard magazine, even though Rob gives it a lot of hate in his new episode, and he gives a lot of hate of it throughout the years. Wizard magazine created a multitude of comic book fans that are still comic book fans today. If it wasn't for Wizard magazine, I wouldn't be as big a comic book fan as I was. Wizard magazine taught me so much about comics and about comic artists and history.
Actually, you know what, Brian, did you get that message I sent you? I finally found where my first article where my first letter to the editor was read in Wizard magazine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Wizard 24 in the toy column is the first time I was ever, moved to make a comment in the comic book world. So there you go.
Yeah, and you got to keep in mind what Wizard magazine did is it gave strong women, bad girls, cheesecake a platform to the modernized comic book world. So not only was it Marvel DC heavy, it also highlighted the Lady Deaths of the world, the She's of the world, the Gen 13s of the world, the Witchblades of the worlds that we would not know about, because keep in mind, not a lot of stores, no matter how much you look at Lady Death, not every store carried Lady Death back in the day. So I think Wizard magazine was not only a great innovation, I think it was a great innovation that technically informed people more and educated us more. If you look at the Prime articles, most of the Prime articles were Image guys, were Chaos guys, were Crusade guys. They weren't really Marvel DC. And if they did do Marvel DC, it was McFarlane or it was Liefeld.
I'm reminded of that great Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson. Well, you made me, and therefore I made you. And well, yeah, but you made me first. And I kind of just imagine Rob Liefeld grabbing Wizard and Wizard grabbing Rob Liefeld and just yelling that at each other.
Yeah.
I really think that the Wizard world made Rob Liefeld, even if they ragged on him, you knew he was.
Yep.
Well, here's another interesting thing. Lord Tapman says, don't forget how speculation caused by Wizard almost ruined the hobby. And, this is a very interesting thing because, we got into this innovation conversation because of Rob Liefeld's latest podcast where he talks so bad about speculation. But I'm going to be honest. I think that comic book speculation and comic book collecting and the money that the value that it's quote unquote worth has been the biggest innovator in the comic book industry. It's given us bags and boards. It's given us short boxes to keep in long boxes. It's given us price guides. It's given us grading. Grading is one of the biggest innovators in the last 20 years. And there would be no grading of comic books and encapsulation if there wasn't a value associated to these comic books. Yep. So let's talk about grading. Grading started in the late 90s with Wizard magazine, right? Wizard magazine goes hand in hand with CGC and grading. And Wizard was a big champion of CGC. I don't know how that they were together. I would love to learn more about that. But I remember when CGC first came out, they would have part in the back of the Wizard that would give prices sold on graded books, 9.9s even back then, and 10s back then. You can see sales of books in that Wizard. Again, quote unquote fair market value or market value.
I don't know how Wizard did it in those early, those late, I guess it was early 90s. I know I was one of the Wizard consultants for price guides when I opened my store in 2005. And I was one of the first people to tell them about Grimm Fairy Tales. There were several of my speculation posts even then where, they were trusting my opinion about these books. So I don't know how they did it before me, but I know that they would send me out a little thing and then I had to fax it to them. Kids watching the show, fax machine was like a computer printer that would send things through the phone lines that you had in your office, and you had to pay an extra like $30 a month to have an extra phone line for it. So there was a lot of innovation still, even at the end of Wizard.
Well, this is pretty interesting. Shout out to the 99 Newsstand. He asks if we remember, do we recall which issue of Wizard had the first CGC ad? And what I've been able to find, this is Wizard Magazine issue number 100 from late 99, where it says, "Welcome to the new millennium."
Oh, look at that red PSA looking label they used to have.
Yep.
Interesting.
So, yeah. Again, CGC goes hand in hand with Wizard, and whether you want to believe it or not, there's always a little fuckery in speculation and markets, and it's obvious that Wizard had a little fuckery going on.
A lot of fuckery going on.
But it pushed. It was definitely an innovator, whether you like it or not, and this is one of the biggest innovations in comics is encapsulation and grading. And it has really, become a rocket of innovation in the comic book world after this, with, live streaming, eBay, right?
But here,
eBay.
Bryan, once again, do you, I'm not trying to be pedantic with this argument. This to me goes back to, it's a third party advertising another third party to manipulate the markets for another third party. You start looking, but I don't think any one comic book, and I'll preface this, obviously people buy a book pre-graded by CGC from some of the creators and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't increase the value of the writing. It doesn't increase the value of the cover art. People are making things to go in slabs. I do understand that. That is definitely a market. But the comic industry as a whole isn't elevated because we have slabbing.
Well, hold on. Smokey Collect says your segue, and he spells segue Segway. It's Segu. It's not Segway. It's Segu. Your segue was a what the fuck, comparing speculation to products needed to protect and carry around comics. Listen, bags and boards and short and long boxes weren't created to carry around comics just to carry them around. It was created to protect them. Why to protect them? Because they're valuable and they're worth more in good condition.
Chat and, if you can, open that up. I sent you that. And this was just the 1990 version of it. I know they made these for about 10 years prior to that.
Yep.
So Sears catalog used to have you want to start collecting comic books? We'll send you. And I'm pretty sure it was Mile High that had a couple of the deals to put these bundled comic books together. And if you notice, there's a New Mutants 87 in that photo there.
And
they
86.
would send you 50 comic books, 50 bags and boards. They sold you a special box to put them all in. The industry was definitely, but once again, this is a third party coming in and figuring out a way to change some of our money from your local comic shop or your spinner rack to their pockets.
Yeah. Yeah, Lord Tapman says he brings up the bags and boards innovation, and he's saying that was that Richard Bell, and that's a great question. I don't know who came up with the idea of bags and boards for comics. I'll look that up. But again, we go from the wizard and the grading boom, right? And then there was years of pushed innovation because of a big corporation that joins the fray, eBay.
Yep.
eBay became a major player in all this when it comes to innovation in the comic books industry, because now people are able to jump over one of the other biggest innovators in comic book industry, the comic shop, the local comic store, where it went from newsstand to LCS, and now it goes to eBay. And you have these the third market, right, which changes everything. Boom. It's like that moment, in Stephen Hawking when,
Yep.
So eBay was an amazing thing. And I remember when eBay first started, I didn't get on eBay for comics. I got in eBay for Star Wars figures. That was my first foray into eBay when it very first started back in the day, where you didn't have to get verified. You paid with checks. You would send people checks. Yeah.
Oh God, I remember those days.
Yeah.
I started on eBay in '99, I believe.
Oh, it was glorious, man.
You could still leave. You could still leave negative. A person could buy your item, never pay for it, leave you a false negative feedback. You could then reply to their negative feedback in a negative way. You could leave negative feedback on that unpaying buyer. There was so much fuckery back then.
Yeah.
Smokey, I'm fucking with you, man. Don't worry, bro. I'm just fucking with you.
I think you want to. I think the one thing that we might be missing was the creation of forums at the time as well.
That's a great
So
one.
forums was a place for comic
the internet.
Fans.
Yeah,
the internet. Yeah, the internet. But forums were very, very big. The forum I was in, and this is like 2001, had 100,000 people in it.
Rec.art.comics.collecting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I think with the third market coming into play, the orphan customer can now participate, right? A orphan customer is a customer that doesn't have any comics in their city, might have a spinner rack. And so we're inviting
your number, Jesse. I love that number you have.
Which one?
1,200 comic book stores, yet there's this many people.
17,500 cities across the nation right now. And that's probably up a little bit more. So if you do the math, we're what? 0.006% or something like that. And there's 77,000 people that sell comics on eBay. So you got 77,000 sellers. So let's just say all 1,200 sold on eBay. That means there's 75,000 people that don't own comic book stores selling comics. So not only the innovation of the opportunity to sell to people across the world, but the innovation of people being able to become self-owners and business owners of something was a big innovation as well.
When you look at innovation in all aspects of innovation, it usually comes from two places. One, defense, right? Innovation, the main place where innovation around the world comes from is defense. And the other thing and I know, Dennis, there's a negative connotation to those money lenders and those money changers, but most innovation comes from third party groups, eBay, Overstreet, CGC, not from within the industry, like the publishers of comic books or the people that are like a tip of the spear, but the people who are making money off of it, right?
Right. But see, I would just like us to have two different sets of standards when we talk about innovation. And one thing that we missed, and we never bring it up here, and I don't even know the name of it, but does anybody remember when Neil Adams over at Continuity decided they were going to make their comic books out of that fabric material that didn't rip?
Tyfleck. Tyfleck.
Yes. To me, that's an innovation.
Yep.
You know, they didn't look great, but the industry just abandoned that. They were like, nope,
Right.
we're not doing that bullshit. Can you imagine where we'd be now with all modern books from 1991, probably when Neil Adams did that book, all the way to present, all being made
You're
out
talking
of
about Miss Mystic 2-Up. It was all
Sam Marie.
polybag sealed.
Yeah.
Each one had a weird semi-million dots in a thing, and you would see her if you put it up the right way.
So what I'm saying is if the industry had adopted things like that, we probably, we'd still have third-party grading, but it wouldn't be on modern books. Well, every modern book would be absolutely untorn.
If you think about the innovations from quote unquote the industry itself, most of them are failures.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can go through our history of there are more failures. Probably we're about 75% failures, 25 thereafter. But what you want to look at innovation is what we still use or what has upgraded, right? So we had talked about what is upgraded now. So if we take our phone and we take our Android 24 and we hand a kid who's only had an Android 24 and we hand him a rotary phone, he won't know how to use that rotary phone. But what we've done is we've evolved that technology, that innovation into this.
Yep. Now, instead of Wizard Magazine, you have Cover Price, who not only gives you all the trending comic books this week, they give you all the new comic books this week, as well as stories and write-ups about all kinds of stuff and interesting things. It's all at the tip of your fingers, not on just a computer, but like Jesse said, your phone. You have Key Collector app, which a lot of people think that's the bane of the industry. Rob Liefeld was not happy talking about these types of apps and speculation apps, but
somebody in the chat was also trashing on that.
Key Collector has really helped a vast majority of the new comic book collectors that have joined in the last 5 years. Key Collector is their wizard, right? Cover Price is their wizard. It's all in one little place. And I'll tell you what, I can jump on Key Collector and click that random list button and be just as interested in that random list. And if I would have grabbed a wizard next to my shitter, you know what I mean? Like,
well, and I use Key Collector to train my employees.
There you go.
I can't put 40 years worth of comic knowledge into an orientation package to explain what comic books are, what key books are, which ones are priced $5, which ones are priced $2. I can't put that in an orientation pack. I can't teach 40 years to a guy that might only work for me for the next 6 months. I can have Key Collector on the store phone and go, look every one of these up, put them in one of these 3 columns, put a Post-it note if it's over this. I'll come through and review your choices later. And then I'll go through it and I'll be like, okay, this one's definitely not that. Darkhawk 15 starring Venom is not a $2 book. All the other Darkhawks are. This one is definitely not a $2 book.
Right.
Et cetera. So I have a use for it. That use allows me to train employees how to spot more valuable books for my store. That's invaluable to me.
Yep. Very interesting. One of the big innovators in comic books back in the late 90s to early 2000s were those comic book programs like you could put your whole collection on this comic book program. It would cost, I remember buying it. It was like $400, $300, but they would give you updates to it and you could constantly go and put all your stuff in there and they would constantly be updating those things. I haven't thought about those until this night for probably a good 10 years because we have Key Collector.
You used to
Cover
put them on
Price.
your BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And you'd have to offload it to a zip file and transfer it to this.
CLZ, stuff like that, I'll tell you where some of the biggest innovators come from in the comic book industry is how they create comic books now. Printers, being able to email updates on the art and the storylines. You don't have to be in the bullpen anymore.
You can have a penciler in Brazil, a colorist in Europe, and a publisher in Japan, and you have a comic book.
Yep. And those are some of the biggest ones. And here's probably one of the biggest innovators from the industry. This book right here, ladies and gentlemen, The Man of Steel from DC, John Byrne, was the very first variant from a publisher. And once variants entered the fray, everything changed, in my opinion.
35-cent variants. There were variants before this.
No, this is considered the very first purposeful, like they did it for the purpose of a variant. Okay. Yeah. Those 30-cent variants were test variants. This is the very first they did it on purpose, to give people the choice which cover they wanted. Okay. And
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
50-50 variant. Yeah.
And once this happened, everything, a big part of the industry changed. And you started getting ratio variants, right? You started getting, it
first started with promo variants. Spider-Man, McFarlane Spider-Man. If you ordered X amount of the book, you were allowed to buy this many of that, and they would send you the platinum. So there were a lot of different freebies variants that popped in between this and the solicited variant.
Yeah. And then I don't know when the first ratio variant was. I'd be very interested to find out what the first ratio variant was.
I think it was either New Avengers #1. Jesse, can you comment on that?
No, it's way before that.
Is it?
Yeah, because it would have been a independent book. It wouldn't have been a Marvel or DC book back in the day.
That would have been the first Marvel one, though, I think, was New Avengers #1.
Yeah. Possibly.
That was like a 1 in 10, 1 in 15, 1 in 25, 1 in 50, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because you could go back to, man, I'd have to really do some research on it, but I would say the first ratio book was an independent company, probably in between 75 and 80. So I'll do some research on that. But I'm pretty sure there's a couple.
You're talking like Boris the Bear type stuff?
Yeah, that type of stuff. Yeah, that was kind of innovated in that way. But I think the whole notion is, you got to constantly think out of the box.
Oh, and actually, Adam from the chat brought up, I do remember that might have been around the same time, was you had the Spider-Man 21 annual, the marriage. You could either get it with Spider-Man marrying.
The white cover or the
Parker.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Valiant. What about the Valiant variants from 1990s? The gold edition?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So 90s, you have Valiant, which was the one, buy 1,000 to get XYZ.
Yeah.
You had the mail-in copies, right, during that time as well. Yeah. You had the Carmine Infantino. You got 2 versions of the Carmine Infantino Treasury, Spider-Man versus Superman, that if you did the mail-in, you got the certified copy versus the regular copy, and I believe there's a slight difference there as well. That's 1977, just off the cuff.
Here we go. This is something I found. As a marketing tool, I've been told that the first actual ratio incentive variance was Dreamwave in 2002. The first one's So, and he brings up the New Avengers. The first ones I remember were New Avengers 1 through 6, which started as a 1 in 20 for #1, then 1 in 19 for #2, a 1 in 18 for #3, and etc. So, that's very interesting.
The incentive was to keep the retailer from lowering their orders.
Yes.
As drastically as they usually would
on a second or third issue.
I'm gonna agree with that. And I do remember the Dreamwave. And around that same time, also you get Image was doing weird little variants like Noble Causes had those 2 variants for the first
Family Secrets.
Deathmate. Deathmate had it. You had the Tor books, right? So you had certain tour books in the 90s.
Faust had a million variants.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what happens is you have people doing research, but they're not really doing research, right? And if you really dig down and you start doing your independent,
Smokey in the chat might be right. Scud the Disposable Assassin had a very early variant.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, Scud, Knights at the Dinner Table, right? They had one. So you can really go back into the 80s, maybe early 70s to find these answers to that. But I think if you start somewhere, right? If you say, well, 2002, okay, well, I don't have to look 2002 up. Let's now start 2001, 2000, and go in there thereafter. So, but I think the whole point of the conversation is that as customers had disposable income, we would want to keep their income in that comic book store on a Friday when they came in and got their new issues, which would be interesting. I don't know when they moved from Friday to Wednesday. I don't know when that happened, but trying to keep their money, because keep in mind they had their weekend.
Yeah.
So they're coming in on a Friday. We know we ain't getting them on a Saturday and Sunday if they come in on a Friday because they have their weekend. So I think the comic book industry has always had innovation in it, whether it be good, whether it be bad.
Well, but here's what I'm saying, and once again, I'm going to overlay that Kenner explanation onto this. There's a period of time where they don't give a shit. And I honestly think we're kind of in one of those periods of time, because as I sat through the retailer luncheon at San Diego, I didn't hear anybody tell me anything that I thought was going to move the needle from the industry.
Right.
Sure, PSA is going to start slabbing books. Is that an innovation? I don't think so, but it's definitely an alteration of the status quo. But as far as this industry is concerned, I don't hear anybody coming in saying, I'm going to innovate the wheel. I'm going to put metal around the wood. I'm going to put rubber around the metal. These are innovations. And I don't hear this industry saying, we're going to sink money into innovation. We're just going to suck the last bits of marrow out that are currently existing.
Well, I think they tried to do that with digital comics, and it failed unbelievably. And that really showed that comic book people, they love their comic books. They love their funny papers, and
right.
it's a big part about a tangible thing, and that's what makes comics so different than any other collectibles. Cards, coins, all that stuff. There is a functional value to them, other than just saying I have this. You want to be able to read it. You want to be able to flip the pages. You want to be able to, see if it has an insert. If it doesn't have an insert, is it a Mark Jeweler? Does it have its Marvel value stamp? Like all that stuff, and a lot of collectibles are like that. Collectibles are such a big part. You can collect anything. The very first thing that I ever collected were nails, because my parents, we moved into a new development that had all kinds of new houses around, and I would go from each house development and collect what I called kinos, which were nails, and I used to collect different size nails. We as humans have this thing where we have to collect shiny things, right? New shinies. And it's just something about humans that we have, so.
Well, imagine if you collected for 40 years and only shopped at one comic book store for your whole collection.
Yeah.
You technically have missed the growth of the industry outside of that store.
Especially if that store only did Marvel and DC, and you had no idea that the entire 80s, 90s, 2000s, Image revolutions or
everything that you go through. So we need innovation. We need more platforms to be more successful, so we can push forward and figure out how we grab that 5 to 8% of this younger age that's coming in, which 5 to 8%, if we were to do that, that's a huge amount. Well, I don't think it's attainable, but I think it's possible.
I want to talk about some recent innovations that are changing things, and maybe some innovations that might be coming. And obviously some of the biggest innovations that have happened in the last, a couple of years are key collector, cover price, but also YouTube and content creation is a major innovation in the comic book world because it's bringing this to the viewer, and it's showing that anybody can just jump up here and talk about this, and it's, you don't have the comic shop anymore. You have YouTube, right? You don't have I'm going to go to the comic book shop on Wednesday, but I'm going to go an hour early just so I can sit there and bullshit with people. No, now you have Beyond Wednesdays. Now you have Comic Tom. Now you have Dave Vengers and Swaggle House. Those are the places where people now go to hang out in the live chat and shoot the shit about comics, or hang out on the show, right? On my Saturday night show, you want to jump on, you can jump on. A lot of people just put the link in the thing and anybody can jump on. This has become the radio, the comic shop, everything. Content creation is a major innovator in the world of comics and everything.
And I had said this last night. I had the game on, and then I turn off the game and I go to YouTube to watch Tom Grossi tell me about the game. And I got the TV right there. But because it's more entertaining, it's more engaging, my opinion matters if I write something in there. I can tip them if I want. The opportunity for people to come on YouTube with zero experience and be a influencer to talk about stuff that maybe they do know or maybe they don't know.
And he overemphasized that zero portion for some of those YouTubers.
But the point is, their opinion has value to it now, whether they do know or don't. And they will eventually learn because of it.
Well, here's another thing when it comes to that zero experience thing. Keith playing Covertune brings up the retailer exclusive variant, which anybody can make a retailer exclusive variant. It used to be that you had to be part of Diamond, and in order to get into Diamond, you had to show that you had a comic shop and prove it. Now, anybody can call themselves a retailer, go get an LLC or tax, number, and contact Marvel and say, I want to do a retailer exclusive. And you can do it.
Like we had JTC on here, and look at all the other, self-publishers. You don't even need to. The artist can be the publisher now.
Exactly, and that's a big innovation. That's a huge innovation. Shout out to J. Scott Campbell, JTC, Scotty Young, Audie Granov, Alex Ross. Those are those innovators.
Right. Yeah, I think when you look at the growth of store exclusives, as someone who's done over 400 of them, some of them the most successful store exclusives in our this century, I guess, is the notion.
They're the best store exclusives.
So the notion is, the whole idea of an exclusive is to sell out of it, right? That's the whole idea of an exclusive. And when that changed, and when you're doing, whatever it is, a Rick and Morty or a Bob's Burger to sell out, but then you started seeing people do 500 and sell maybe 100. And then they start liquidating it to 20 other stores at half a cost. I think that's kind of where we've changed a little bit, having people do retailer exclusives that aren't technically retailers. Well, it is what it is. What do we then do there? But I think retailer exclusives, if done smartly, can be a huge advantage for you. And the other thing that is very important about retailers exclusives, if you do them correctly, is it creates these bonds and relationships with those publishers and the creators themselves.
And the customer.
And the customer, yep.
Derek Neiman says, who would be the artist to do, the first person to do the cover for Beyond Wednesday's exclusive? And he says, Robert Crumb? Nope. Jimbo Phillips, Santa Cruz Skateboards, John Pound, Garbage Pail Kids. Those are the type of artists that I want to. Alex Pardee. Those are the type of guys that I would love to get to do Beyond Wednesday's exclusive. But that being said,
I think your notion is you want to keep your family tight on an exclusive as much as possible. So whether it be the writer, whether it be the artist and the writer and the colorist, right? Yeah. So pretty much Nia Rufino did most of my coloring for all my exclusives. I've done 25 exclusive with Murat Michaels, not all Do You Poos, right? But with the same colorist. So you want to really create this great relationship. We started doing legacy numbers, right? So everything numbered. A guy comes in, I want all number 50. So it doesn't even matter what the exclusive is. He gets every 50. So you have to be innovative within your exclusive to be successful. And then on the bottom of the line, listen, if 65 people are doing the exclusives, I have no idea why you would want to be number 66.
Yeah.
So
that makes no sense to me.
Here's another huge innovator in the world of comic books in the last couple of years. Live selling platforms, Whatnot, eBay Live, Facebook Marketplace. Those are probably the biggest innovators in the last 5 years are live selling platforms. Yep. It's absolutely unbelievable. It's changing the game in the biggest ways. You know, to hear Jesse say when somebody says, "Hey, can you give me the advice on what I should do to get my own comic book store?" And Jesse, what do you say?
I say you're crazy. At the end of the day, when you have the great opportunity to eliminate rent, insurance, a massive amount of employees having to be open as a certain amount of time per day, 10 to 6, 10 to 7, well, that costs money, 7 days a week. The time that you have to put in when you're trying to put stuff up, right? But a customer comes in and is a good customer of yours, and you get in this hour conversation. So what I have found in my test market, and listen, when I was at the store, we did very well on live streaming. But I have this $42,000 a month nut on the first of every month. Yeah, you pay during the time. I moved to Florida in a 100 square foot room. I now do 10 times more than my store, with the margins and costs eliminated down to about 90%. So I've done both. So when people do approach me, I'm able to give you both sides. I'm not going to tell anybody not to do their dream. Do your dream. If you want to open up a comic book store, great. But this industry is freaking tough. It chews out people. It spits them out. And there is no love coming from anybody when you're in that store. And that's just reality. In my 42 years of doing this, would I open up another store? Absolutely. And it's going to be 100 square feet so I can buy stuff from people bringing stuff to me. And that's as far as I go. And so that's where I believe live streaming has given me the opportunity to expand my brand, expand my customer base, be able to show everything is relevant to every single type of customer out there. And I can do it 24/7, 7 days a week, 366 days a year. And I think that's a big advantage that I have been able to look at both ways. Right. And trust me, the last 15 years at Just James Comics has been amazing, and we'll do what we have to do. But to have this opportunity to end this show, go and sell 200 books in an hour, that's, I think, a great thing that live streaming has done for us.
Yeah. And that's kind of
like hold on. I want to let me just say the one last thing. My innovation that's changed the way I do things is I did things the same way everyone else did them for 17 years. I had, for 15 years. I had 2 years off from COVID and also my heart attack. I had theorized all of these things that I wanted to do in my head. And it wasn't until I took the initiative to change the way I did everything that I feel I hit the sweet spot for the way I sell comic books. And that's to sell to the people who are the normies, that 80%, that I don't think the other 1,199 actual comic book stores are selling properly. And that's just where I feel that innovation can happen at every level, at different levels. And it's how you innovate your style or lack of style is how you do it.
Right. And keep in mind, most comic book stores come in, they're Wednesday to Wednesday. Yeah. Right. You have to pivot away from that Wednesday and Wednesday. I wanted Wednesday to be my worst day in sales, because if it was my worst day in sales, I'm doing great. right? On all the other days. Yep. And so that's when we started live streaming 9 years ago, and no one was live streaming on a Monday. No one was live streaming on a Sunday night. No one was on at 2 a.m. in the morning. We took those opportunities to find that common customer who's up, who works a third shift, who works a second shift, who just has a bad day, and you want to give them good comic book therapy. But with that comes responsibility. And I think responsibilities where live streaming drops a little, right? Because we have a lot of people that sell that aren't responsible, don't ship out the product, don't know how to grade. So with anything new that comes into the comic book world, platforms, socially, we have these responsibilities that we have to decide. Like Dennis said, you have to decide how you're going to innovate for your store. We also have to decide how responsible we are. And that's very important. You also, and I'll kind of leave it at this, you have to have blind eyes a lot, and you have to have these blinders on and be focused on what you're doing. What everybody else is doing, don't care. You care less. What am I doing? Am I taking care of my customers? That's our focus.
Lead or be sheep.
Well, I do, before we call it a night, I want to talk about one innovation that I'm really excited about, that I've been talking about for a couple of years now. The one thing that I think that comics doesn't have, that trading cards has, that just is the monster in trading cards, and that is the luck of the draw, the luck of the pull, and being able to have a pack of cards, random in what you're going to get in those packs, random odds, and being able to open those packs and that excitement of pulling those great things out of there.
Well, the industry has tried this a few times, Brian.
They have.
Remember when they
Harley's
did the
Little
random
Black Book
sketches?
was a big one. Yeah. And it was fun. And the other night, during one of my sales, I pulled out some of those Harley's Little Black Book, and it was fun to talk about what could be in those. And we opened them up, and unfortunately, they were just the regular variants. They weren't the color Alex Ross variants, but they were still Alex Ross books. Well, this is something that is very cool, and I got to give where credit is due, and shout out to the people at Whatnot for coming up with this idea right here, you guys. This is going to be available this Friday. I'm going to have a sale this Friday, and these are X-Men 97 comic packs. Comic trading packs done in tandem with Marvel and Whatnot. They did a really good job working on this. I haven't opened them yet, but you're able to pull 4 different types of variants. Let's see if we can get this to go here. 4 different types of variants from 4 different artists, including Rob Liefeld and others. And then you get 4 different types. You can get a gold foil, a silver foil, a virgin, and a trade dress. And there's also autographed copies in here, and they're very cool. They're foil. You can't search them. That you open them like a card pack. They look like a card pack, and I love this idea. And this is the type of innovation that I really like, that is going to kind of work with the trading card industry to give that excitement of opening a pack and the luck of the draw. So come hang out with us this Friday, and those will all be for sale. I've got 30 packs. I was sent, I think, 30 packs. Could be less, but I'll have a bunch of packs available for sale. They'll all start at $1. Come hang out with us. We'll see how it plays out, and it could be a lot of fun. So shout out to the team over there at Whatnot for pulling that off, and we'll see how it continues. And this could be a big thing that could happen with other publishers if it plays out in a good way. This could be a new norm in comic books. We kind of saw it in a little bit of ways with the Walmart packs, with the Five Below packs. Right, that they tried to kind of do this in a way. They didn't have the card aspect with the foil packs and stuff, like in the ratios of what you're going to pull, the ability to pull autos and stuff. But they had those at the Walmarts and stuff. And if we start seeing these at Walmarts and these on hooks at stores, that could be a game changer. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think the notion is when we see something like this, it's, again, business is about percentages. You're not going to sell this to 100% of your customers. So you're trying to say, what customers buy mystery packs now?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I have 10% of my customers that buy mystery packs. So I'm then buy accordingly to that 10%. I'm not going to buy to my 100%. That would be crazy. So you then buy to your 10%. And then you then find that other new cool thing, that new toy coming out, and you then put some percentages in theirs. Ollie's does this all the time. You walk in, they have thousands of mystery packs, right? $4.99. And it's luck of the draw. And so I think at the end of the day, there's always comics for someone. And you just have to figure out, do you want to be that someone store, or, Dennis with his 80%? How you then do that, and how you then do that daily is the most important thing. Friday is great, but what are you selling tomorrow on Wednesday?
Yep.
That's important. So.
Yep. That being said, you guys, thank you for hanging out with us on our 30th episode of the Industry of Comics show. I want to say a big thank you to Jesse and Dennis for making the show possible every Tuesday. It has been a great success, in my opinion. It's created a lot of great fans of the channel. I get a ton of information and constructive criticism about the channel, and the most of the information and I get from people that is positive comes for this show. So I want to say big thank you to Jesse and Dennis for making this possible. And thank you to every guest that's ever been on here. And a big thank you to every one of the viewers, whether you're hanging out with us live every Tuesday night or you're catching this on the replay. Seriously, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys for making this possible. So that being said, you guys, we're going to see you next Tuesday right here at 9 p.m. Eastern. Adios.